Hey you guys, what's cracking? Godsman here, coming at you with another tournament result video. So this time we've got the tournament results for the September tourney event, which was the V Team Tournament. That's right, V Series, aka V Revival, now had its first ever team tournament. We managed to get over 30 players entering the competition, and with that, we had more than enough teams to be able to host our own team tourney, and it was quite a lot of fun. Some really diverse teams with a lot of different decks being brought to the table here, and overall, some really intense battles. I really enjoyed this event. I thought it was a really good step forward for the budding format that is V Revival. Now, today I'm going to go over the results of the tournament, which decks topped, and also go over the deck lists of a lot of those topping decks and kind of get my thoughts on each. We've got a lot here, as you could probably assume by the massive amount of tabs I got up on the screen here. So I'm going to try and be a bit expedient as I'm going through each list, just get my general thoughts and then move on to the next, because we don't want to be here all day, right? So let's go ahead and start with this chart here, which details what the top cut was. So the September V Team Tournament was composed of 12 topping decks, because we had 4 teams, which 3 players per team, right? So it's kind of like a BSF or whatever. Among those, we had 3 Aquaforce tops, 2 Genesis tops, 1 Gold Paladin, Shadow Paladin, Oracle Think Tank, Angel Feather, Nubatama, Bermuda Triangle, and Grand Blue top, right? Probably one of the big standouts here is that it seems like United Sanctuary just kind of slaughtered in this event, taking up a literal half of the results here. The only United Sanctuary deck that didn't top at all was Royal Paladin. As a matter of fact, Royal Paladin didn't see a lot of representation in this tournament right now, probably due to a general lack of interest currently within the fan base. But aside from that, the most represented deck wasn't from them. It was actually Aquaforce. 2 of them being Maelstrom decks, as well as 1 Thavas deck as well, because Thavas is still alive and mostly well, right? Which is not too much of a shocker, all things considered, but at the same time, yeah, the fact that it's still potent deck to this day, well played. So from these term results, we can see that, yeah, it was a fairly diverse format. No one deck completely dominated the circuit. And as I mentioned before, we had over 30 players there, and there was a lot of decks that did come really close to topping from various other kinds of strategies, right? Things like Mega Colony, we had Dimension Police, Nova Grappler. A lot of these kind of decks like came so narrowly close to topping, right? And it just kind of went to show that this is a pretty open season kind of format, which it generally is, as you know, you can tell if you've been watching the past like V Revival tournament breakdowns, right? There's rarely ever really a tier 0 meta that like props up in this kind of format, right? I mean, being a part of the design team, we definitely assure that these sort of things do not happen. Anyway, from there, this was what the specific matchups looked like, right? Now, Team Takamikazuchi was actually the team that I was a part of, right? So Takamikazuchi was composed of myself, as well as Genesis and Thunder, which you may remember them because they were actually other members of the deluxe tournament that we hosted a few months back. Now, we actually ended up winning the whole tournament because, you know, we brought some really gangbusters decks, locked on in, and, you know, through skill and grit, we managed to make it through. Having an almost clean record, by the way, right? I know I have a tendency to like win like these events, right? But I didn't do it alone. Both of my teammates went nearly undefeated as well, so they put in so much work to make this happen. So really proud of them for that one. We also had Judge, Jury, Seal, Blended Vision, and Taco P. So we're gonna go ahead and go over each of the lists of like these teams here. We're missing one from Taco P, but aside of that, we have all the lists here, and these lists definitely like break it down a really pretty picture about like the different kind of staples and tech choices that you can bring into all these different clans in V, right? One thing to note is we're going to be starting with Taco P, then moving on to Judge, Jury, Seal, Blended Vision, then finally Takamikazuchi. Effectively, we're going 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st place last, right? Now, one thing to quickly mention is, like I said before, Takamikazuchi won the event here, and you can see what the topping decks were from that, right? I ran Fenrir, the Buddy Genesis went in with Shura Stealth Dragon, Ninja Master doing Ninja Master things, and then we had Thunder on Liberator. Really solid games we had all around. All 3 of these decks were very fearsome, and we were all pretty relative in that event, right? So it just felt like all of us had like moments where we had to carry the team forward, and it was really good stuff. So let's go ahead and start with Team Takapi, who was in 4th place here. Now, we don't have a Team A's list here, but Team A was actually was just a Maelstrom list, which there's another Maelstrom list later on, a far better Maelstrom list, in fact, right? So of all the things to not present here, that was definitely the one that was, you know, relatively speaking, expendable, right? It wasn't a unique list at all. So Here is Team B's, which is Lucivius. Now, Team B ran Oracle Think Tank, most specifically Battle Sister. Now, this is just a pure Fromage list because there's no other way to build for Battle Sister as of right now, although there was a recent preview that kind of suggests something new is coming in V for Battle Sister, so you Battle Sister fans are definitely going to get something nice from that. This is a very straightforward list, right? 4 Fromage Reverse, so Fromage Reverse being your win condition. Regular Fromage is a backup, right, but mainly it's just used for draw power. You've got Trifle as your win condition because it has a Sentinel restrict. You just stack triggers and a bunch of power on it. Sometimes what you'll do is you'll lock 2 back rows and 1 front row and just have an entire column for Trifle to just one-shot them with the spearhead maneuver. It's really nasty, right? You've got Macaron, was a 10k beater. You've got Casada, which is, well, 10k beater. I should say it's a 19k because it's get plus 10k. Casada also gets 10 plus 10k, so it's a 18k booster or beater there. You're able to get some power thanks to Coco. You've got an extra bit of power and shield thanks to Mocha. Panatone gives extra power to your first trigger check, so you get a lot of power here, right? It's just a very basic draw and beat down kind of deck, right? It's only a 3 attack deck, but thanks to all the draw power, the protect marker, the added shield value, and just being able to consistently see your triggers all the time, because you're able to stack up to the top like 6 cards of your deck and then draw 3 thanks to Fromage Reverse, right? So it's a very vicious card, and that's what I'm saying, right? Like, I mean that you can stack up to 6 and draw 3 from Fromage Reverse. You have to CB discard to do it, so it's only a holistic +2, but that's still very strong. And locking 3 means you get plus 15k to the front row. Huge beater deck. So yeah, overall, really competent deck. Not really too much to say. I think the only thing about this list is that it's probably not as optimal as it could be because it's not running any V revival cards. It's only running pure V, and I think it's because the team here wasn't as versed in the revival cards, or they just didn't want to use it. I know the player A, their team stated they didn't want to use it flat out, which was, you know, their bad, I guess. Now, here we have 4 of the Kusanagi, which is your critical sentinel, right? Now this is typical, but the thing is that in V Revival we have Fesco PGs, and for some of the past, for the past deck lists you guys have seen, you've noticed them as well. They're really nifty non-trigger PGs that are recurable 20k shields for the drop zone by removing other sentinels. That would be huge for a deck like this, and they also have other benefits like being free PGs in the early game, and the fact that if they're the last card in the hand, they're also a free PG. It's just a really, really strong defensive option that just is a staple for basically every deck in V. So not having that really does hurt the defensive element of this deck. They also don't have the new heal triggers, right, which actually have better late game scaling. They're pretty much always going to be 25k shield in a lot of instances, except for certain decks. You actually run into a lot less like multi-attack in this format right now because a good bit of the protect decks and even some force decks are actually just 3 attack decks flat out. And even the Excel decks, right, like the Excel marker doesn't count as like a restand or a superior call. So those heal triggers are, you know, I can see where you wouldn't even run those necessarily, but they're really strong. But still, like, I can see why you wouldn't like go for like a whole 4 split on that, right? Maybe 2-2 split. That tends to be the most common thing. There's also no effect draws as well. Effect draws go into soul to draw a card. So yeah, a lot of staples missing here. I want to bring that up for this one because again, these are the kind of staples we're working with, and it really contextualizes, I think, one of the reasons why this list didn't do quite as well as I think it could have, because OTT is a very strong deck, but you know, you also need to build it correctly, right? And this wasn't going at full capacity, so add some context to this one. Now their player C was a Revenger player, the only Shadow Paladin player of the tournament, and this was Cohen. Now he played a really nice list here that kind of splits across several different win conditions, right? So the center point of the deck is my avatar, Revenger Raging Form Dragon, 4 copies, right? Superior riding any Revenger means that it combos with any of the other Revengers here on the list, so it's just more or less a no-brainer 4 of, right? Now, we're running Illusionary Revenger Mortured Phantom. This is V Revival Mortured Phantom. The original Mortured Phantom, which could spam force markers, got banned, so we have a new one here. This new one allows you to Superior Call when it's rode upon or when it attacks from the Vanguard circle, and you can either Superior Call a Great Treeless Revenger or a Blaster Dark Revenger. When you do that, you actually give that called unit and Mortured Phantom extra power, so it's emulating his Break Ride from back in the day. He even gets the ability to retire units and get a critical, so he's got a little bit of everything here, but at the same time, not only does it require Limit Break, it's also a CB and a Soul Blast, so that is a little bit on the expensive side for a deck like this, which tends to be a pretty big eater on resources. 2 Dragwiller. Dragwiller is actually probably good going like going first right away, because you can just get that free superior call from the deck from the on play skill, and then you can kind of rush them down a little bit with the extra numbers and the attack, because Dracula doesn't really care about your opponent's grade at all, so it's really good at rushing. Then you have the one of Raging Fall. Now Raging Fall, from what I saw from Cohen, it seemed like Raging Fall was best suited for trying to line up the RFD combo. For those who don't know, the RFD combo involves superior riding Raging Form on top of Raging Form, and then after that second Raging Form attack, you superior ride into Raging Fall Dragon. Now with Raging Fall Dragon's skill, at the end of the battle that you attacked, you can CB3 and discard 3, right? Then if you're either at 5 damage or you have 2 or more lock cards, you can stand them up. So effectively, if you're at ultimate break 5 damage, you can go for a CB4 combo, which results in 2 extra force markers and a total cumulative of 4 Vanguard attacks and 3 rearguard attacks, right? So it's a really insane, it's a really insane 7 attack turn. And by the way, all 4 of these attacks are with twin drive, so you get 8 drive checks total, right? So it's highly expensive because you're retiring 6 rear guards, you're riding 2 Great Threes from the hand, which is basically like discard 2, and they're having to discard another 3 cards with this effect and CB3 to make it happen. But if it kills the opponent, then you'll pay the cost, right? From there, you get a lot of the Gangbuster Revengers, right? You have Blaster Dark Revenger, Soul Blast 1 to retire, which is just really typical. Tartu's really good. Tartu's just your mandatory searcher. Renal is a really good, like, on boost. This is one of your best ways to get advantage. Shadow Lancer probably requires a little bit of explaining. So Shadow Lancer has a skill when it's placed in the Vanguard circle. Just look at the top 7 and either add Blaster Dark Revenger or Mordred Phantom. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's just like Masquerade. But whereas Masquerade is an on-place on Vanguard rear, but you have to retire a rear guard after you do the skill, this is only when placed on Vanguard circle, but you don't have to retire crap, so you get to just make it a pure +1. It also has a secondary skill, which is really powerful, where during the end phase of the turn that was retired by your Vanguard's ability, you can Energy Blast 3 in order to take a Grade 3 Revenger and put it in the soul, or put it into your hand if the opponent's Grade 3 or greater. This means you can recycle RFD copies, you can return Mordred Phantom to the soul for when you're trying to superior, well not superior, but rather regular ride of Dracula Phantom. Shoot, you could do all sorts of stuff. Maybe you're stuck on like Drag Ruler, right? But Drag Ruler isn't going to have the resources to do it, so you add back a Raging Form, then ride into that instead. It's a very versatile card, and really maximizes one of the finest points of Revengers as a deck right now, which is that you have multiple win conditions that you can put in the deck pretty seamlessly, right? Because they all operate fairly similarly, right? They have that unifying concept retiring the rear guard, so good stuff. Your staples is actually more or less what you would expect from the staples. You run a Fesco PG, you've got an effect draw, you've got a couple of the Fesco heals. Good stuff there, right? Overall, really solid list. Cohen definitely did good bringing this to the event. Now we're moving on to the third place team, which is the judge, the jury, and the seal. So we'll begin with the judge. So this was actually our buddy David here. He's bringing one of his old favorites, which is Night Rose. Now, Night Rose, unfortunately, didn't do quite as well in this event, but I think it's because it was mostly due to Night Rose sort of underestimating the defense of the format. He cited to me that his personal win record this deck was not that great. I think he even lost more than he won, if I recall correctly, or it might have been half and half. But anyway, he sort of needed to get carried by his team into the top cut here. So let's go ahead and go over the list a little bit. Now, for the most part, you're running a lot of your basic Night Rose stuff right now. The Night Rose herself proper has the ability that whenever your rear guard attacks or boosts, it's going to automatically get 5,000 power, but it will retire at the end of that battle. It's sort of simulating Hollow, where Hollow forced your unit to retire, but it's doing it during battle, and it's after they attack or boost. It's mandatory, so you have to do it. So you're not going to be really holding on to a field with Night Rose, unfortunately. Then it has a skill when it attacks to CB1 to call a column of units for the drop zone, a whole column. Now, this oftentimes cascades into more multi-attack and superior calls. Beatrice, when it's called Soul Blast 1 to call a unit to the field, that's the most classic example. Probably the most powerful application of this is with Riveting Franch. Now, Franch has a CB1 skill when it's boosted on attack in order to call a card from the drop zone. Any card as long as it's not Franch herself, which can then cascade into stuff like Column Bar, Jesse the Ghosty being a self-retiring countercharger, so it's a free countercharge in this deck, which this clan actually has multiple countercharges, so CB is not really that much of a choke point for it for the most part. You have a lot of ways to recoup her, and he decided Jesse the Ghosty's the only one he needed there. Ghost Ship is another really classic example. So this is one of his best call targets. It gets plus 15k power for a 24k base speed, or 29k minimum if it's on Night Rose's power up, but then it's going to mandatorily retire and draw a card. So you get to like convert it for draw and then superior call it back, then convert it for draw again. If you guys play Resile on standard, this is a very similar attack pattern that you have going on, right? You convert field into advantage and power, and there you go. From there, Greed Shade is one of the most busted cards of the deck, because Greed Shade lets you discard to mill 2 and you add any card from your drop zone back to your hand, including the cards you discarded. So your entire drop zone is a second hand because of Greed Shade. This gets further expanded upon because Column Bard can CB to dump any single card from the deck to the drop and then call anything. So this also is sort of like vicariously a selective superior call from the deck of your choice, which is absolutely insane. Siege Trolling lets you dump cards on Vanguard Circle, but can also mill cards to retire to draw, so you got more of that field to hand recursion kind of element. You're just converting field to hand advantage like for Resile. This is a grade 3 searcher, enough said there. This one discards and bot decks itself in order to superior call, so this is great because it helps you like build back a basic formation if you're like out of resources in the hand. This works really well with Beatrice because you can superior call Beatrice, and the Beatrice will soul blast to superior call anything else anyway, and then you can cascade from there, right? So this also bot decks itself, which helps stave off deck out, which that's not generally a possum. That will not really be a problem with Night Rose because it's more aggressive anyways, the list, but it does have good defensive elements because, you know, it's a protect deck anyway, right? One last thing to note about this deck, obviously it's running a lot of the basic generics, right? Fesco, PG, effect heals. No draws on this one, but you know, I guess I can understand. I have a lot of draw power anyway. This is also Fabian the Ghosty. So Fabian Ghosty is basically our Skull Dragon replacement because Skull Dragon got banned in B. So instead we have Fabian, which gets a small increment of power for every card in your drop zone. Gets 1,000 power for each card in your drop zone. This isn't a recent errata. It actually was originally for every 2, but it got buffed recently. So for instance, let's say you have like 10 cards in the drop zone, it'll get 10,000 power, right? Which is basically half of a Skull Dragon. And also when it's done attacking, it retires itself to give 2k power to one of your other units for each grade of your opponent's Vanguard. So usually it'll be plus 6k. A lot of power here, but that's all it does. No Vanguard skills, there's no Vanguard skills, there's no advantage, no nothing like that. All it is just pure power. So it's just a one up there to like try and close out games. It's like Skull Dragon, but a lot more fair. And yeah, that's Night Rose for you. This is Maelstrom. So good old Xenon Tynos himself, Xenon D Tynos. Yeah, he went almost undefeated with this deck. He only lost in the semifinals, bro. He won every other round, and he more or less carried his team along with his player C into the top cut. So this is Maelstrom. Now, Maelstrom has a lot of like tricks up its sleeve that really enhance the strategy from base V, and this is one of the reasons why the player A list for Takabi, it wasn't really worth mentioning anyway, because it didn't play any revival cards, so it just wasn't nearly up to par, right? Now, what we've got here is, first off, a Break Ride Maelstrom. Break Ride Maelstrom has the skill that when you ride it or when you ride over it, you can CB1, and now on the 4th battle of the turn, you retire one of your opponent's rear guards, you draw a card, and you give 5,000 power to the attacking unit. So it's a really strong effect that is very reminiscent of the original Maelstrom effect from all the way back in Asia Circuit, right? That retire, draw on 4th attack, it's the same thing here, so it's really nifty. And it pairs well with both of your other Maelstroms, most particularly Reverse Maelstrom. Reverse Maelstrom, the Dark Cloud Sacrifice, is still one of the best ways to like destroy the opponent in Maelstrom. This is just an insane card to me. At the end of the battle that it's attack, if its attack did not hit, for every of your locked cards, you make them choose a card from the field or their field or their hand, and they put it in the drop zone, not including the Vanguard, so rear guards or hand, I should say. This is really sucky for the opponent because Maelstrom has this skill whenever your unit's attack does not hit to lock a card, and he gets 10,000 power, and your opponent has to choose a rear guard to retire, right? So this is making your opponent retire a bunch of cards, this is making your opponent retire a card, and then because their field is empty, let's say you had 2 to 3 locked cards, well, your opponent's discarding that many, and that's on top of having to block a card that is going to be swinging in for like minimum 32k power, 2 critical in 3 drives. So they're having to eat at least another 2 cards there for like a PG plus discard, right? It's really, really insane. And even if your opponent like lives it, you're just going to do the same attack pattern next turn, right? It does have a weakness to control here, and admittedly, right, this is a pretty tried and true deck, but I do have to wonder about its ability to come back, right? So here's the thing, right? This deck has a lot of strong multi-attacks, right? And I think these multi-attacks do really good under the Glory Maelstrom win condition rather than the reverse Maelstrom win condition, right? Now, Glory Maelstrom has a skill that gives your front row 10,000 power if you have a Maelstrom in the soul. Then, until the end of the turn, your opponent can only call one card from hand of Guardian Circle for every time you attack. Basically, let's say you're attacking for like 29k, right? If your opponent doesn't have specifically a 20k shield in the hand or greater, they cannot guard that attack because they cannot use multiple cards. They cannot even intercept because this effect also stops intercepting in its card text. Now, some of the new goodies here is Starless. Now, Starless has the ability at the end of the first battle to CB, and it swaps itself with a back row unit. So that's like it's like one of those classic unit swap for multi-attack things that Aquaforce is known for. And then afterwards, Starless will bounce itself back to the hand. So this is actually one of those ways to get around control, which is really nifty for the Blue Storm archetype. And it's of course its home deck is in Tetra Burst Dragon because this is the Legion Mate of Tetra Burst, but it also works really well for Maelstrom, which also happens to be a Blue Storm deck. You also have access to Tempest Border. Tempest Border gets you extra resources and also helps you column swap. So this expands more on the Maelstrom Reverse sort of game plan where you can kind of like poke them, but the poking can also really work for Glory Maelstrom because your opponent is still having to deal with a really annoying guard restrict. Callista is the energy cycler. When you play her, if you've rode a grade 3 over a grade 3 during the ride phase this turn, Callista can EB3 or Counterblast 1, and at the end of the battle that she attacks, it's the first battle of the turn or second battle of the turn, so first or second wave in other words, she restands herself. So she's another restander. Hermes here is look at the top 5 cards of the deck in order to add any Blue Storm card, but if he's on the rear guard, you have to discard afterwards. So it's a break even unless you ride it as a Vanguard. And now probably one of the most important things is this is like one of the best supports for the reverse Maelstrom side of things, which is that at the end of the battle that he boosted, if it's the first or second battle of the turn, he will restand himself for free. So this means that you can have an entire column to go again. This is good if you're trying to go for the glory win condition, but it's very versatile because it also means that let's say you boosted the column and it didn't hit the opponent's Vanguard, this will then restand, which means that it's a lock fodder for reverse Maelstrom who needs to lock specifically stand units. So that's really nifty. Drifting Flow Fencer is of course, just a really easy card to use in this deck. Now, one thing I want to mention is Bubble Wall Corporal. Now, Bubble Wall Corporal has a skill that when the attack boosted hits, you look at the top 7 cards and add a Maelstrom. Now, personally, I'm not a big fan of this. I think between your Hermes, your Drifting Flow Fencer, and also your Gregorios, which I didn't mention before, Gregorios can Soul Blast 1 restand, but is also a top 5 searcher for Blue Storms when you place it as a Vanguard. So you have 3 top 5/top 7 searchers in the deck already, and you have almost max copies of them. Why do we need Bubble Ball Corporal, right? I feel like this right here could have been better served for a different card that might have helped better with your win conditions. Because if anything, Maelstrom probably has too many Maelstroms going around rather than not enough Maelstroms. But I can kind of see his argument because I think he was trying to go specifically for break ride into one of these. So by having all this searchability, you can ensure that you have the proper chain of rides there. But ultimately, it's not that impactful enough to kind of take up deck space for this Bubble Ball Corporal. There's a few options that he could have done instead of that. But admittedly, there isn't that many Gangbuster grade 1s, so maybe that's why he didn't do it, because he didn't have a lot of options there. I don't know, it just feels a little weird here, right? Especially because we don't have like the mandatory hitters, because Maelstrom had a couple cards that let you trigger on hit effects even if you didn't hit that battle, which is one of those dumb things Bushido ever did, but it's real, it exists, right? And Bubble Corporal could have benefited with those, but we don't have those here, so it just feels like a really weak link. But overall, this is still a really powerful list, and this list, as I said, went almost undefeated. It just swept through the competition, absolutely washed them away, pun intended. And yeah, Maelstrom ended up receiving a couple of hits on the ban list afterwards because of this top. Most particularly, Glory Maelstrom got banned for it. So yeah, congrats, Zenon. You definitely helped us get rid of a menace. Now, Team C of Judge Jury Seal, and I'm going to go a little bit faster here because I'm definitely running the clock. This is Anj. Now, Anj was one of the top 3 decks of V before it had discontinued, right? So pre-revival. And seeing it back here on the stage, even after some selective hits, is kind of surprising, but at the same time, not surprising. Now, a lot of the power of Anj comes from perfect performance Anj herself. When Anj attacks, you can CB1 to return any number of your and your opponent's rear guards to the hand. Then you activate the following abilities based on the number you return. If you return 2 or more, she gets 10,000 power. If you return 3 or more, you get an imaginary gift force, just for free, just like that. And then if you had 4 or more returned to the hand, then you can search the deck for any normal unit and call to the rear circle. Yes, any of them. You see all of these units right here, they can be called. It's really dumb. And this is on the extra force marker you're generated, so that superior call is going to be on a circle that probably has at least 2 force markers. Turn 4 is like 4 force markers, and then turn 5 is 6 force markers. It's just really dumb. And of course, you're bouncing back all of your units to the hand, which that condition is super easy to fulfill, especially because it makes space for the superior call. So it's just like having your cake and eating it too. You can even bounce back your opponent's rear guards for that like weird sort of like sniping. Like, yeah, sure, you're bouncing back to the hand, so it's fairly niche, but it has happened, especially if you don't even have the physical number of units required to get the 4 or more condition. You can just bounce theirs as well, so that condition is almost like guaranteed to go off. Now the main win conditions of the deck is pairing Anj with both Relinka and Svalsevave, or I'm not really sure how you would like pronounce her name. Cerulean Jewelry is her title, so we can just call her Cerulean for now. So both of these cards have the effect that when they attack, you can discard 2 copies of themselves from the hand to stand them and then draw 2 cards. So effectively, not only do they deck filter you by 2 cards, they also get to be a restand. There's no other constants. It's just that discard effect. And you might be like, okay, so that's kind of a once per game effect for each of them, right? That's not that bad. But it's not really the case, because they also have an on-hit skill on Van or Rear that when they hit, they can search a copy of themselves from the drop zone or the deck to the hand. That's really insane. And one nuance about this is that, yes, these are obviously going to be restanding on that force marker pile, so it's huge beatdown. But one thing about these that's worth noting is that you can, let's say they have Orlenka here in Anj, right? You swing with Orlenka on the force marker, and if it hits, you get to add 1. But even if it doesn't hit, right? One thing that's nifty is that by bouncing this to the hand, you can then call another one from the deck, and the one that you bounce to the hand can be one of the 2 Orlenka discard fodders for the newly called Orlenka. It's really strong. And of course, you could recycle the card back because these add from drop zone to hand, of course, right? And there's other cards. I think it's this one right here that actually bot decks, normally used for the drop zone as well. So it actually bot decks your call targets. From here, we've got Aqua and Sedia, which are good ways to get draw power and dig deck, and a little bit of power ups where they're doing it, right? So just really nice, like, filtering units. It helps keeps things really consistent in Bermuda, right? Bermuda has so much draw power, and this is a really good example of it. Quail here is a soul charger and also can call itself to rear circle when rode upon to then just soul charge. So it builds soul. And the reason you do it is because Melfi, aka Sealfi, aka the Impaldio player in Deluxe, aka the Bofsagara player in he was the Impaldio player in the Destined Showdown and the Bofsagara player in Deluxe. Yeah, so guys actually had a bit of a history here. So anyway, so he played Nikita. Now Nikita, I'm actually a little surprised there's only 2 copies considering how powerful it is, but fair play, I guess. So he saw this card a lot from the games he did play. So Nikita has a skill that when it's placed on the rear circle, the guardian circle, you can soul blast any number of cards. For every card that you soul blasted, it gets 5,000 power and shield. And if you soul blasted 3 or more, you draw a card. So this card, you basically plop it down, soul blast 3, it's a 25k shield and a draw. Really nifty. Or it could be like a 23k plus beater as well and a draw. And it's just using soul. Hardly any of these other cards use soul. This card right here does use soul, although it's a little bit of a niche card anyway, so you don't really need it. So you're just going to be riding, building soul, and then Quail's getting you extra soul, and then you just burn it all for Nikita, because what the hell else would you need it for, right? So yeah, just really easy system. One thing about this deck that's also really funny, it's not running any energy cyclers, so there's no EB, so you're just going to be EB7 to draw off energy generator. So it's like, that's one thing about this deck is a little inefficient on the resources, but aside from that little tidbit, it's really easy to get going. It had massive beatdowns and just overall did not read as a very fair strategy, right? It was one of the best ways to ramp up force markers in the game. Like there's a couple of better ways, like Reindeer, I suppose, and maybe Astro Poet, but it's just still like insane. It's so much draw power, superior call, extra shield and power, and just Anj being an exclusively busted card. So yeah, but the Seal still had a lot of tough fights here, and watching his performance, he definitely stuck to his guns and did the very best he can, because even with a deck like this, the format is still like a Wild West, right? There's a lot of really strong decks, and this did not go undefeated. It is worth noting that this did not go undefeated. This ended up losing a couple times and to other really powerful strategies, but still Seal, he earned just about every win that he came in with this. So yeah, well played, brother. So now we're going to be moving on to the second place lists. Second place was Team Blended Vision, and oh boy, these guys were strong. All 3 of these dudes like hella cooked, dude. As a matter of fact, they were in the top 2 of Swiss So not only were they in the top 2 of the top cut, they're the top 2 of Swiss. These dudes were just elite, almost never taking L's, it felt like, right? Up until the very end of both Swiss and Top Cut, and to the same team too, which is Taka Mikazuchi, right? But aside from Taka, these guys felt unbeatable, right? So starting off with team captain, player A, we have Anak. Now, Anak, people may remember as the Overdress player from Deluxe. Really strong, proficient player. He also topped in the previous V tournament, so guy really knows how to cook with V. And the deck, one of the decks that he brought back then is the deck he brought for this event, which is Amaruta. Now, Amaruta is one of the strongest Genesis decks that we have right now, which is saying something because Genesis is one of the strongest clans that we have right now. The build of it is very much akin to how it used to be built. You have mostly V revival cards. As a matter of fact, this entire row right here is just V revival cards, and this is a V revival starter. These are also V revival cards, so yeah. With the exception of some triggers, it's just straight revival deck, right? It is an almost fully decked out deck from both Clan Collections Volume 7 and 9. And for good reason too, because Amaruta as a strategy didn't exist until Revival. So the basics of this is that you're trying to use the skill of Amaruta to go for really big multi-attack. It's a lot like Goddess Investigation Ishtar from back in the day. For those of you who play G-Next, you'll know what that is. And all these are really strong restand targets in different ways, most particularly Kotonoha, who has a really devastating on-hit ability. Awanami has the skill to convert into soul if it was chosen for restand in order to add a grade 2 or greater from soul to the hand. And then this is just a really big beater as well. One of the strengths of Amaruta is that in addition to have a really strong, easy, like multi-attack, like a very stable game plan of just 5 attacks, go wham, go big. One thing about Amaruta is that it has a lot of card advantage, cycling, and tool recursion. The skill of Nino allows herself to be a call from the soul, so you have that CB1 to get field presence, and she can also look at the top 2 and sort of deck stack them, right, and soul charge. So by doing that, you're able to get back really good field presence from the soul. Kotonoha, as I mentioned before, is an on-hitter, but she's also a really good beater. For each card that you put in the soul this turn, she gets 2,000 power, and while you're on Amaruta, she can't be chosen by card effects, so she's actually a great way to fight against control. Medusa is potentially the MVP of the deck. Medusa has a skill that if your grade 3 is rode, if your grade 3 was placed by riding over another grade 3, so aka turn 4 onwards, it's kind of mimicking the Persona ride stipulation of energy cyclers in D series. You soul charge 2, and then you add any card you want from the soul back to the hand. So just about anything in your soul, I mean, the soul is your oyster, right? Take whatever you want. Kibitsu Hime has a skill to bot deck anything you soul charge in order to give 5,000 power to unit and bounce back. So this is a card that lets you sort of take back on bad soul charges, right? So let's say you threw down Kibitsu Hime, and then you soul charged like a critical trigger or a heal trigger, right? You could bot deck those, and then it bounces itself back. It's technically like a Soul Blast 1 because you denied yourself a soul, but by bot decking it, it's like sort of benefiting you in a way. It also helps against deck out, which deck out is definitely prevalent for this deck. As a matter of fact, it died due to tech out in the finals against like its final opponent, Taka Mikazuchi. So that is a super big problem for Genesis if it's trying to turbo out its soul. Awanami, I already mentioned its utility before. It goes into soul in order to add back or get your greater from the soul, so it kind of fulfills a similar utility to something like Medusa. On top of that, whenever you ride Amaruta during the ride phase, you can call it from the soul. So it's just like Nino, it's also a way to get back that very stable basic board, right? Toka has the ability to energy blast to move into soul to draw, and then you look at the top card, you stack it on top or bottom. So it's like the V series version of Nobaris, right? It's a Nobaris for Genesis, and it also lets you recycle back a card from the drop zone into either the soul or the bottom of the deck when it's soul blasted, but you have to bind it, and it's effectively a once per game skill because you can't do if you're already bound at that fight, right? Dromi here is the counter charger, so you run a couple counter chargers, and it also bot decks Dromi units as a cost of that counter charger, so that's arguably even more important than the counter charge because it helps stave off deck out, right? You've got Fesco PGs here, you've got Fesco heals here, no draws because I mean we're trying to maximize our critical like kill you death. It's a very aggressive deck, it seems like, and on top of that, draws can be a little risky because you do have deck out as an issue, but overall it's got a really fine balance between offense and defense, and it's very player expressive how to play it, right? Because Amaruta is a generic Vanguard. It can play with any card that isn't archetype locked in its effects, and there's a lot of that in Genesis. So this is probably one of the most free, self-expressive decks out there, and Anak definitely chose something more aggressive while having some pretty decent defensive options. I remember fighting against this man in the finals, and it felt like I just could not break through his guards, right? He was an expert at making sure to min-max his field for offense and for defense. Now, the player B here was Daniel. Really proud of Daniel for doing this, man. He was working really hard to improve in V, and he finally got his big break here, going all the way to the finals in V, man. I'm so proud of him. The deck he brought was Thavis. So this is the Thavis deck I mentioned before out of the 3 Aquaforce decks. And oh boy, Thavis is a piece of work. So Thavis has the ability to superior ride a grade 4 from the deck. So it's kind of like a pseudo Strider. And of those, we have a Lambros and a Thavis. Now this Thavis is the Storm Dominator Thavis. It is a V revival card. Storm Dominator allows you the ability to restand a rear guard when it attacks, and that unit can attack from the back row. Furthermore, Storm Dominator allows you on 4th or 5th wave when your unit attacks to retire when your opponent's rear guards. So it kind of adds in some of those classic Thavis elements of versatile restanding along with nice little bits of control here and there. Now this deck is going really light on the grade 4s, which I think is a little yikes, because if you damage check one of these, or you can't recycle them from the drop zone back to the deck with the skill of Nikki, which is important for Lambros, right? Thavis actually has an ability to bot deck himself from the drop zone, so he's fine. But if you can't like Nikki back a Lambros, you're gonna be stuck on Thavis, which Storm Dominator is definitely versatile and the control is nice, but it's also not as strong offensively as Lambros. Lambros is certainly your finisher, but it seems like Daniel went a little bit of a different direction here, because he's actually running a couple copies of Thundering Ripple Genovius. Genovius has a skill when it attacks to CB1 and stand one of your rear guards. That's if you have no standing front row, right? So it's kind of like you're swinging with all your front row units, then you swing with him last. This means it kind of de-incentivizes front triggers, except not really, because if you're on limit break, you can stand your whole board except for Genovius, so it stands all of your rear guards. It's a lot like the War Deity Assure Kaiser from V series, but for Aquaforce. And yeah, that's really insane. One of the things that Thavis is like known for is Excel spam, because when you superior ride into him, you don't get the excel there, but then at the end of the turn, you have to like de-stride, quote unquote, and you ride back into him, so that's the second excel. So you get 2 excels by the end of turn 3, which is above average, and saying that it's above average really gives you an indication where V's at these days. It's a lot more balanced than it used to be. So Genovius here is a good way to make use of all that space on the board and just go for a really big beatdown, but you know, it can still be a little gimmicky. I didn't really see Genovius come up as a strong unit here, so Daniel had to mostly rely on Thavis anyway, and he did run into a little bit of consistency issues due to not having a lot of these grade 4s. So I feel like there was a couple of mistakes made in the deck building of this deck. Another one that I'm a little questioning on is Dennis here. So Dennis has the ability to rest a rear guard to look at the top card and call it. It's a hard once per turn as well. It has that clause at the end, but you don't know what you're going to call, and even though the rest is helpful because Thavis needs rest units, at the same time, you're plussing like such a crap ton. So that top deck call is a little redundant, it feels like. And even though it's kind of a free plus, if you're calling like a critical trigger, that hurts, man. And there's a good chance that you will be calling triggers from that, which, I mean, unless you're calling Malika here, that's gonna suck, dude. So yeah, it's kind of an RNG reliant card in a deck that doesn't really need that kind of RNG reliance to function optimally. Pathroth is here because Genovius is here, right? So Pathroth, if it's in the soul, it lets Genovius's restand come with extra power bonuses to all the units that he restood. So that's definitely a really powerful asset here. If you're bothering to run Genovius, you should run Pathroth, so that's definitely fine. Maxing out on Pursuit Assault, because Pursuit Assault is the best card in the deck, along with Narissa, the second best card in the deck, because Pursuit Assault, Soul Blast 1, and Rescue Rear Guards to draw a card. Massive draw power. This converts itself into the soul at the end of the turn to draw a card, which can then fuel Pursuit Assault. More draw power. This Thavis is one of those like decks that really embodies Dracoforce, as the name was called there. So yeah, a lot of good stuff. And then obviously we've got a couple like other staples. Repressed Strike Dragon is a ride fixer. Its skill states that when it attacks while boosted, you can CB1 to stand it up. Then if it's the 4th battle of the turn or more, it gets 10,000 power. You can even do this as a Vanguard, so you can get extra drive from that, but you have to discard for it, so it's still break even. This is one of your best like restanding columns, and this goes This goes really hard if you're like trying to pair it with the Lambros game plan. Now, he didn't go front triggers, he went critical triggers instead, and I think that could be potentially the right move here, because even though front triggers give you a lot more power value, and that's traditionally the way to play Aquaforce, with critical triggers, one thing that you have going for you is that it incentivizes you to poke with some of the rear guards, then have this Repress Strike column be the 4th attack. It stands up with an extra 10,000 power. It goes a second time. Then you go Lambros, you stand them up, and they get 5,000 power each, so you go for a 3rd time with that huge column, and you can throw like critical triggers on it too if they like PG the Vanguard. The Vanguard's going to be at 3 drives, and it is usually a 33k column with those 3 drives, so it's pretty threatening, all things considered. So yeah, there's a lot of good fundamentals here. The draw power mixed with the sheer amount of multi-attack and good bits of power does make Thauvis one of the most competent Aquaforce decks. It lacks the cutting-edge win conditions that Reverse Maelstrom and Glory Maelstrom brought to the table, but in exchange, it just had so much more consistent advantage engines and was able just to build that board in almost any case scenario, right? So yeah, really interesting list from Daniel. Some choices I don't agree with, but yeah, I can see why I took him pretty far here. Now, the player C was Wings. Now, Wings had Malkuth, and Malkuth, like, we've seen it a lot of times before, right? It's the Protect 2 deck. You call a bunch of cards with Protect 2. Not only that, but you get Superior Ride Shin Malkuth, which turbos Protect 2s. You get to intercept with plus 10k shield with those Protect 2s, so you get a really tanky field. Shin Malkuth makes sure that those cards that are on Protect 2 cannot be retired by any card effects, including your own. That's good for Aeroid Zion here, who has to retire himself customarily to use his removal skill, so really good choice on Wings' part there. So yeah, we know all about this, right? One thing to note is that he is running Zion, like I mentioned before, so he has a little bit of like a toolbox going on with Malkuth compared to the previous Malkuth topper, Kaitos, which was a little bit more direct and to the point, right? He was less gimmicky with his list for the most part, aside from, I guess, Angel of Hold, or Nurse of Holdheart, which was a little bit gimmicky in my opinion, but you know, I can see the cycle. So he has that. He also has Aeroid Lamido. Now, Lamido has a skill that when it boosts, you can CB1 and your opponent cannot call Sentinels to end that battle. This gets really devastating because he's also running Feather Palace and Amputation Angel. So we have a deck here with huge columns and 3 different methods of Sentinel restricting. He actually ended up winning his match in the finals against our player B, precisely because he was able to block out the Protect markers and Fesco PGs by having a column, like all 3 columns be Sentinel restricts. His middle column with Malkuth's Swing was a Sentinel restrict as a Lamido. Then he had a Feather Palace on one end and an Amputation on the other end. It was just too much for the Ninja Master to overcome there. It's a really insane thing. Now, since then, this deck has actually suffered a minor hit where Amputation got reduced to 1 copy. So it's not outright banned, but it does limit its like consistency of seeing this card, because this card was objectively the best Sentinel restrict, and it does Sentinel restrict for free, right? Even though you need Protect markers to like get it going. So that had to get hit there. Overall, really strong, competent deck. One thing is he also has a really interesting win condition with Ramio Reverse here. Ramio Reverse has this massive, like, X number Battle Door. I think you get Battle Door up to, like, 5 cards or something with it. If I recall correctly, that's what it was. So, this is another way to, like, just eat your opponent's card advantage alive, dude. He didn't really get to use it from what I could see for the most part, but it was still an interesting tech card. So, yeah, we can see that Wings' interpretation of Malkuth is a bit more varied compared to the more consistent one-note one that we saw from the previous tournament, right? But still, to see it go, Malkuth go second multiple times here, and it also went second in the second V Revival tournament as well, right? Malkuth has actually been one of the more consistently topping decks, and now we have more than one player doing that topping, so it's not even just a pilot thing, right? It's also, like, the players are strong, but, you know, the deck itself also has a really strong formula. So yeah, Malkuth is just really proving its mettle here. It's lovely seeing 3 attack decks like this, like, really go for it. The Battle Stitch just being another strong 3 attack deck, right? So yeah, good job there. Well done, Wings. Now we get into Taka Mikazuchi. These are the V Revival champions, the strongest team in all of V. I know I'm kind of gassing myself here by vicarious property, but, you know, let us have a moment, right? Now, Team Taka Mikazuchi. Starting off with my list here. So I ran Fenrir because your boy loves some Genesis, and I love me some Fenrir, right? It was my favorite unit from G, and so I was waiting for a time to really try to lab out this deck and break it in half. And I decided this was the tournament to do it, because I have not won a team tournament yet in the server or in IRL like BSFs. So I decided, let me just put my best foot forward and try to be the strongest anchor that I could possibly be. So the main thing about Fenrir is that it's an extremely versatile deck, but but also has some really ludicrous attack combos going for it. And if that's familiar to you, it's because Amaruta is also just like that. So, you know, go effing figure. Genesis is just one of the most varied and yet one of the most like hard-hitting decks, right? It's one of our best force clans that we have in V. So the centerpiece of the deck is the Mythical Hellsky Beast Fenrir as well as Mythic Beast Fenrir. So Mythic Beast Fenrir has the skill to Soul Blast one or more cards from your soul, and the cumulative grade of the cards you Soul Blast is the grade that you add from deck to the hand. So you can add literally any single card from your deck to your hand based on the grades you Soul Blasted. Let's say you Soul Blasted like a grade 2 and a grade 1. That adds up to 3, so you can add a grade 3 from your deck to your hand selectively. Insane work, right? If that wasn't enough, then you're also able to Superior Ride into Mythical Hellsky Beast Fenrir. Now, Fenrir has a couple different modes. If you Soul Blast him during the main phase, he Superior Rides himself, and he not only gets a 3rd drive, but you can Sentinel Restrict for his battle. If you Superior Ride him during the battle phase, though, he loses a drive, so he's only 1 drive, but you get to call any card you want from the drop zone to the rear circle. So, as a Superior Ride during the battle phase, he's actually 2 extra multi-attacks in himself. Main phase doesn't have any extra multi-attacks, but that extra drive, along with the Sentinel Restrict, is really devastating because Fenrir has a secondary skill, which is like his enhanced revelation skill. Whenever your unit is placed on the rear circle, you're able to look at the top 2 cards of the deck and you can stack them on top of any order. You may also put like one of those cards into the soul if you prefer, right? So the point is, if you go main phase Fenrir, because there's 2 ways to play this. If you go main phase Fenrir, you're going to be Superior Riding him as soon as possible, stacking all of your force markers on the Vanguard circle, and then you call a bunch of like rear guards down, and you stack the deck until you have like at least 2 critical triggers on top of the deck, right? Then you're able to like spearhead your opponent from 3 to 6 with this really huge attack with the Sentinel Restrict, right? That's how that version plays. But the battle phase one is a little bit more aggressive and just like plays more typically to like a multi-attack deck, right? You're just trying to beat down your opponent with like a 6+ attack turn, because Fenrir is also multi-attack in of itself, because he can Soul Blast when you get powered, then CB want to call back that Soul Blasted card. So the idea here, like your most basic combo would be to have your Mythic Hellsky Beast Fenrir in the soul, and the way to Superior Ride him is to Soul Blast him during your turn, right? And it's the phase that matters when you Soul Blast him, like I mentioned before. So this is in your soul, and then your combo line goes Vanaragon, Gleipnir, and Fenrir, right? So you swing Vanaragon goes in the soul, that's 1. Then you swing with Mythic Beast Fenrir, Soul Blast out Vanaragon, then see if you want to call it back, so that's 2 attacks. You swing with this again, that's 3 attacks. You swing with Gleipnir. Gleipnir's skill is going to Soul Blast 1 to Superior, Soul Blast when you get 10,000 power. You Soul Blast out your Mythical Hellsky Beast Fenrir, which Superior rides itself, and then you can Superior call any card from your drop zone, which can be Vanaragon if you Soul Blast it off of Gleipnir after you put it into the soul for the 2nd time. And so now this is 4, Fenrir makes 5, and Vanaragon makes 6. You can multi-attack further if you use Yugioh, because Yugioh has the ability to Superior Call a non-grade 2 card, but you have to CB1 and Soul Blast 3 for it. And this is on top of this like CB2 this is like CB2, then there's also a bunch of Soul Blasting here, right? It gets pretty expensive. You also have the discard 2 with Fenrir when you do it, right? So you're not actually like plussing in card advantage when you do this ability at all. It's more of a break even. But you know, break even for all these extra attacks is fine by me, man. So yeah, it's some really ludicrous combos here. We also have access to some of the tools that Amaruta had, like Nino to Superior Call from the soul, as well as Medusa, which can like add anything back from the soul to the hand after soul charging. We also have Dromi, of course. I mean, Dromi makes more sense here because Dromi was technically a Fenrir card originally in like G, so it makes sense. Toka is here as well, so a lot of the same tools. We also have some really interesting cards here that we didn't have in the other list, right? Kai Narumi puts a card from hand of the soul to draw a couple of cards, so it's kind of like a pot of greed. You have the Counterblast 1 Soul Blast 2 to do it, so it's sort of like after you put the card from hand to soul, you CB1 Soul Blast 1 for it. But in addition to drawing 2 cards, so it's a +1, it also gets 5,000 power for each grade of the card you put. So if you put in like Mythical Hellsky Beast Fenrir, which is what you want in the soul, you get plus 15,000 power. So overall, pretty decent trade-off. Ameno Hoakari can Soul Blast a couple cards, and then you can give power to like a unit, and then you can put any card from your hand or rear circle into the soul in order to draw a card. So the deck filter, it builds up soul, and then on top of that, the 5,000 power is really nifty because it helps out your offensive game plan. This is best served as a way to power up Fenrir, right? It's also nifty because you can actually Soul Blast Fenrir with a Menohoa card during the main phase, and that's another way to initiate the main phase Spear Fear, or Spear Fenrir as they like to call it. And so it's really versatile that way. Valencia can move an entire column into the soul after it's done battling in order to draw a card, so it converts your column into draw power. Again, field to hand is really nice practice. When you Soul Blast it during your main phase though, you can bind it in order to choose 2 cards. One goes back to the soul, one goes to the bottom of the deck. So it's recycling, soul recursion, and it gets you even more soul with its boost skill while clearing out field and drawing cards. It's just a multi-tool, right? And not Valencia, we just talked about Valencia. A Cider here, we went from oranges to apples now. Apple Witch Cider has the ability to soul charge 2 or soul charge 1 when it's done boosting, like on any given turn. If you soul charge 1, you bounce it back to the hand for free. Insane. Or you can just soul charge 2 for free and just keep doing that if you don't fear control, right? Really good card. Now, Melissa is banned now after this tournament, right? But Melissa was a really insane card. You could Soul Blast 3 in order to make your opponent superior call a card from the top of their deck over each of their rear circles with a unit. This is the deck out tool. You could, let's say your opponent had like 5 cards on like the rear circle. You milled them 5 effectively by transitive property. Melissa doesn't even let them use the auto ability, the cards they called, right? So that's really insane. Azucena. Now, Azucena is a heal guard. And what I mean by that is these grade 1 heal guards, they not only act as G Guardian fodder, which is a premium application. We don't have G Guardians to beat, right? But you remove a heal trigger from the drop zone in order to activate their skill. This one is a Guardian skill where you can put back for like anywhere from 2 to 4 normal units with the same grade for your drop zone or soul to the bottom of your deck. If you put at least 2, you get 20,000 shields. It's a 30,000 shield on its own. But if you put 4, you can CP1 and your Vanguard gets 5,000 power defensively until the end of the turn. So this is potentially on its own a 35 shield if you resolve its effect completely, right? And with a lingering 5k defensive. But even without that, it's effectively a free way to recycle up to 4 cards and be a 30k shield. Absolutely insane work. And as a 1-up, it's great because you just add it back with this card, right? So you're just partying with that, brother. Speaking of 1-up defensive cards, we have Fesco PG can add back. We have 1-of a critical sentinel because it's nice to have this in case the opponent is not allowing the auto abilities of sentinels, or sentinels are just too expensive. You just want to 1 card guard stuff. 2 regular PGs, a bunch of criticals, and a 2-2 split on heals, right? Overall, super versatile deck. A lot of ways to attack the opponent. Some people regarded Fenrir as the best deck in this tournament, even though it didn't get represented quite as much. Genesis and Aquaforce kind of like vying for the title right now. Great Nature has fallen off a little bit due to recent hits, and now Genesis has actually suffered some hits as well, right? Most particularly, obviously, was Melissa, but Fenrir also got nerfed. So now when you superior ride him, you don't get a second force marker if you've already gotten a force marker that turn. So his power gain is a lot less now. So this deck ended up getting hit as well. A lot of these decks ended up getting hit, but they got hit in relatively minor ways. They weren't like super hardcore bans for the most part, right? Except for this one right here. This was bad. But for the most part, these decks mainly just got touched but not brutalized because the format was mostly balanced for the most part, and that's one of the really good indications from it. Was a great takeaway from this format, this tournament. Sorry, a little tired if you guys couldn't tell. Anyway, let's push on through the last 2. So my teammate, Player B, and Captain Genesis, the Ninja Master himself, was running Sure Stealth Dragon. This deck went nearly undefeated in this tournament. It only lost 1 game. Yeah. As a matter of fact, this deck even managed to win against that Maelstrom list from earlier, right? This dude, Xenon, could not say he went undefeated because of Ninja Master. Really close game though, and Ninja Master did need to have Xenon not hit any triggers on the final turn with Glory to make it happen, but still. Ninja Master, bro, Genesis is crazy, right? Because he was able to do so many interesting combos with his deck, right? So, so this guy acts like Shoujo Doji. You can bind 3 cards from your soul, and you choose 2 of your opponent's rear circles, and your opponent chooses a card from the hand, and those cards get bound. Then at the end of the turn, those bound cards return to the opponent's hand, and you have a bunch of ways to make them either bot deck or put in the drop those bound cards to not let them refund their cards, right? So it's a control deck that way, but it can also superior call cards from the bind zone when it attacks. So it also has the multi-attack element of Shochidochi. But then we have a lot of Nubatama things that we can bring to bear here. We have Cyangeki, which is a Soul Blast to rip a card from the opponent's hand. This is familiar because I played this during when I played Mikuro, right? Shiranui also used this, and that was the topping list from the previous V tournament. Misukaze is here. Now, Misukaze is an insane Battledore card. Well, not a Battledore card, but a guard restrict card. When your opponent guards with a grade from the hand to Guardian Circle, they kind of use that same grade to guard for the rest of the turn. Insane, like Glory Maelstrom tier kind of guard restrict. And for that reason, like Glory Maelstrom, it did get banned after this event. It was more or less just waiting. It was a ticking time bomb, and we needed someone to top with it, right? And admittedly, Ninja Master didn't get to use it that much, but still, the times in which it did show up was just like uber impactful, right? So it kind of did go to show that when you do use it, this thing just kind of like warps games around it. From there, we have ways to cycle cards from the bind zone, right? We have ways to put those cards like into various locations. So this is the rip effect. We have the Rearguard Legion. It recycles triggers and also makes your opponent bounce discard, right? So you rip your opponent's cards from doing bounce discard. You rip them from the hand from bind. You rip them from the field from bind as well. And this actually chooses rear circles, which means that your opponent's like effects, which say they can't be chosen. Yeah, this bypasses that. So this is anti-control. Amazing. We have a lot of utility from the bind zone too, right? Kiba Maru can get some extra draw power. You're able to use this card as a sort of a ride on kunai to guard from the bind zone, and it burns itself to the deck when it does so. So it's a recurring one at that. This card can Soul Blast when it calls itself and any other card from your bind zone during the main phase. So it's a board builder so that you can actually have something to swing with before you go Vanguard again on your next turn, right? Overall, hyper versatile, right? You've got so many shenanigans, and it has this beautiful medley of control and combo going for it that I think anyone who's a fan of the shoujo style or just kind of likes these more combo oriented Nubatama decks, this is the deck for you 100%. So try it out if you haven't already. Really well done, Genesis. Man was a goat. Speaking of goats, we have Thunder with Liberators, the final deck list to talk about. So he was our player C, and oh boy, it was not due to power or anything like that. Bro is just as good as we were. Holy crap. So this deck is running a lot of your True Blue Liberator cards, right? We obviously have Gancelot. Everyone knows Gancelot at this point. It did receive a recent like nerf though. A few of the Liberators received a nerf prior to the tournament. Mainly adding cost to certain cards like Energy Blast cost, and also reducing Gancelot's power-ups to where Gancelot is now a cumulative 25k power-up between your Rearguards and Vanguard instead of a cumulative 40k power up, right? So much less power on Gancelot there. On top of that, we now have debuffs to Marin's ability to power up. Her power up increments are a bit stopgap to where she can't get like 3k every time you're calling from the deck, right? It's 1k unless your opponent's grade 3 or greater. Barkall got extra energy blast costs. You got an extra energy blast cost in Galatine, all that jazz, right? So a lot of these decks did get hit, but in really minor ways. It's just like minor errata adjustments to kind of like readjust what the deck's like overall blueprint for resource acquisition, how much value you can get from it is. The win condition of the deck is Garmor. Garmor has the ability to bot deck up to 3 of your rear guards to the bottom of the deck, and by doing that it gets 5,000 power for each one. Then if you put 3, you can get a drive from it. This is great because with Barkall, which is cut off here unfortunately with Marin, but Barkall gives your Vanguard the triple drive ability by bot decking a card from your hand and moving the soul at the end of the battle. So Barkall plus Garmor is a really huge spearhead column that also has 4 drives. And it's really funny because Liberators do so many superior calls from the deck that your drives are rarely dry. You're probably hitting a crit or 2, brother. And this deck is so good at just getting massive card advantage. Garmor can spam up to 5 cards from the top of the deck to the field, depending on the amount of damage you have. So at 5 damage, you can call up to 5. If you're at like 3, you can only call 3. Gancelot calls a couple of cards here, right? Galatine can call a card. You can call a card off of Fallon. Fallon now has a Rearguard Legion in Asclepius. Asclepius recycling back a couple of cards and calling Fallon selectively from the deck. So you can actually call a caller. Even Blaster Blade Liberator has a potential call skill, right? And as a Vanguard, Agavale calls. Marin calls itself, and I mean, shoot, you can actually call when you ride over Josephus. The only card that does not distinctly call a card in the normal units here is freaking Barkall Liberator. Heck, even Holy Mage Irene, the Quintet Wall, has an ability to move one of the cards that you guard with for the Quintet Wall to the rear circle after battle. Even one of your Sentinels calls a card. Literally every problem that Liberators has is solved with calling a card, and it is just peak Gold Paladin, bro. It is a really fun deck. Now, Thunder played a bit more of a sword and shield element of Gold Paladin. He's playing more draw triggers than the average bear, opting for some extra draws for like 5 draws total. And On top of that, he's also like making sure to run the Quintet Wall and also the Fesco PG, so he's having a very diversified kind of guarding pattern. And this pairs well because Gardemore's effect to bot deck units isn't just when it attacks, but also when it is attacked. And it can even give itself a 5k defensive when it does that by E being 4 afterwards. So between the draw triggers, the diverse sentinels, and also Gardemore's like ability, which is sword and shield, you've got a lot of like defense and offense here. Shoot, even other X factors are shield value worthy, right? Gantz like gets an extra 5k defensively as long as you have a Blaster Blade Liberator on the rear circle. So he's a 17k base as long as Liberator's chilling out there. Control cucks it, obviously. You can always attack it, but you know, it's there. On top of that, you have Galatine, and Galatine is a 10k interceptor as well, even more shield value, right? And of course, we're converting field into like the drive for this card, so that's extra hand advantage as well. Barkall isn't on hit to get hand advantage. By calling field, you get a bunch of cards anyway. Josephus can Soul Blast a couple in order to get a draw and counter charge. Just so much like good value here, right? And many ways just to like convert your cards into other more useful ways. Liberators is all about building that board and making the best use out of that board possible. And it's a really beautiful list. I would suggest anyone who wants to play Liberators in V, try out this list here. I think Thunder really hit the nail on the head for a really balanced kind of Liberator list. So well done. Now, that's all we have for the list here. A lot of lists. I talked a lot here. But before we go, I want to quickly mention that this V Revival tournament marks the twilight of the Clan Collection Volume 9 and 10 era. And pretty soon here, we're going to be getting the next sets for V Revival releasing, right? And I want to quickly show them off here. So the cover images here, we have Clan Collection Volume 11. Really nifty. We've got Dragonic Overlord the Great Die Kaiser, and Anger Boil coming back, as well as Clan Collection 12, obviously. We have some really good units here. A couple of Stride units, actually. So we got Magen Tenbu, which obviously Strides, quote-unquote, for V is just main deck grade 4s. You've also got our friend Apoc Maker Dragon, and even a new Ghosty boss, which is a really quaint new option, and one way to really spice up a underappreciated archetype in V Grand Blue. And perhaps one of the most hype reveals is that aliside these two, we're not doing a festival booster this time. The past two Clan Collection, like, dual releases have come with festival boosters. So we had Festival Booster 1 with Clan Collection Volume 7 and 8, then 9 and 10 had 2. For 11 and 12, we're doing an extra booster, which is Born Again Team Striders. Ooh, yeah. So we're getting a lot of that G nostalgia here, boy. A new Dragheart Luward, Chrono Jet Dragon G, and Golden Holy Sword Gurgit all coming back with a lot of their classic units getting good fashion V retrains as well. And also support for decks that aren't revolved around these three, but for these three clans. We're going to be getting a couple of interesting Shadow Paladin boss units, another few support cards for a couple of the more fringe ways to play Gear Chronicle aside from ZTB, and then we've got like a couple of alternative bosses aside from Gogurt here for Gold Paladin as well, right? So if you're a fan of any three of these clans, most particularly of any of these three units, like you'll love G-Man, definitely keep an eye out for this set release. It's going to be concurrent with the Clan Collections, and oh man, we've got some good stuff coming in this, so you're going to want to tune in for that one. And that's about it. So if you guys did like this V analysis breakdown, definitely like, comment, subscribe, and turn on notification bell. And if you want to be a part of these V tournaments in the future and take part in the project, then check out my link to my Discord in the description below. Go over to project news and project discussion. We have a lot of helpful people in the community. We're always growing here, right? So if you want to get started, there's any number of people who will be happy to try and get you on the road there, right? It's a budding format, and the fact that we're able to have a team format at all just really is a statement to the amount of growth that we've had here. And so many of these games were so fun and engaging. It feels like we're on the right track for this thing, right? Like with standard kind of being like topsy-turvy, sometimes it feels good, sometimes it feels not so good. I think we all need an alternative format as like a breather, right? And although this does utilize custom cards, it does so with a really stringent design philosophy and with a lot of beta testing and rounds of reveals and erratas and whatnot. It is is a format that feels, I mean, admittedly, about on par with a lot of the formats that we've actually had in Vanguard's history, right? If I do say so myself. So if you're looking for some nostalgia or just want to break from standard, definitely consider joining the V project here. And with all that said, if you did like this video as well, also check out my other Vanguard content. We do top 10s, discussions like these, fight nights, custom card reviews, anime reactions. The previous anime season 4 just ended, so you might want to catch up with a reaction. There's 12 episodes of straight goodness there. And if you like what you see, again, like, comment, and subscribe. With all that said, take care and God bless.